In the month of June, we just finished a series called Who Are the False Teachers and Prophets? And if you have not seen that series, I will leave a link in the card and also in the description box. And I encourage you to watch that series. But since that foundation has been laid and we understand more about who are the false prophets and teachers that are surrounding us, I think it's best to continue on our preparing for the good work that Jehovah had called us to do in the body of Messiah, Yeshua, Jesus. Welcome to Reconcile with the Kingdom, where we're working towards becoming harmony of the whole word of truth. My name is Patrice Robinson, and I appreciate you joining me on today and hitting that subscribe button. And don't forget the bell as a way of you showing your support. As always, make sure that you have your Bible before you whenever someone is speaking the word of Jehovah. Now, we want to kind of take a look at Paul's writing. Paul, his Hebrew name being Shaul, written 2 letters to Timothy for several reasons. Why did he write these letters to Timothy? Who is Timothy that Paul decided to write 2 letters to him? These letters was not written to the congregation, but they was actually personal letters that Paul wrote to Timothy as a word of encouragement and how to handle specific situations that were occurring in the congregation. This is the same Timothy who Paul circumcised in the book of Acts. Timothy had a Jewish mother and he also had a Greek father, but he later joined Paul on many other mission trips in teaching the word of Jehovah along with Paul. Now, what we do know about Timothy is that his mother name was Eunice and his grandmother name was Lois, and they both were actually strong in the word of Jehovah, very strong in the faith. Now, if you are using the King James Version in the book of Acts, when you start reading about Timothy, it will say Timothus. So that is the same Timothy in the book 1st and 2nd Timothy. And sometimes that can be a little confusing in there that you do not recognize that is the same Timothy. Now, Paul taught Timothy the way to Messiah, and because he accompanied him on many of the mission trips and he matured along the journey with Paul, he was able to send Timothy back to many of the congregations that they were building up and the other believers. For example, he sent them to Ephesus and Thessalonian, and that's just a few. So he did send them back for many other believers as the congregation was building up. So Timothy turned out to be this very trusted leader. Now, the first letter to Timothy was many warnings against false teachers that Paul was writing to Timothy. That some stuff that was going on in Ephesus, and so there were some instructions that he was given to him to prevent these strange doctrines that were going on. Now, we're not going to get into that. Again, I encourage you to watch the video on who are the false teachers and prophets. Now, but Paul identified 2 people that was once in a right standing with Jehovah, but they have left the faith. Hymenaeus and Alexander. These 2 men began teaching that the resurrection of the dead have already happened, so they kind of got lost along the way. Paul informed Timothy how important the scriptures were, and he wrote in his letter, all scripture is inspired by Jehovah and beneficial for teaching, for rebuke, for correction, for training into righteousness, so that the man or woman of God, of Jehovah, may be fully capable and equipped for every good work. Now, people, let's put on our thinking caps at this time. Just think about this. At the time that the apostles and the disciples were teaching the faith of Jehovah, of Yeshua, they were teaching from the Old Testament, the Tanakh, the Torah, the prophets, and the writings and Psalms. The gospel and the letters from the New Testament were not gathered till after many years to after the apostles and the other disciples had passed away. Now, there aren't many of us today that are able to teach Yeshua from the Tanakh. And that's something that are you able to do? Are you able to point to Yeshua besides Isaiah 53? Is there any other way that you can point to who the Messiah is? The Tanakh is fully able to equip the people of Jehovah for the good work, for training us into righteousness, and it will correct us. The challenge is how many of us can see the Tanakh, the scriptures, without the rose-colored glasses. That is still difficult, and that's a challenge that we will continue to face because we have so much of the Christian faith from Baptists and other places that's so indebted into us that it's kind of difficult to see the biblical truth, and you have to continue to read, and continue to study. But that will grow and being able to recognize the biblical truth as you continue on this journey. Now, we must study the scriptures to see the truth, that you cannot read the truth without rightly dividing the truth that leads you to salvation. Paul told Timothy to be diligent, to present himself approved to Jehovah as a worker who does not need to be ashamed, accurately handling the word of truth. Now, I want to point this out to you. That Paul was telling Timothy at the time before the New Testament letters were gathered that he had to accurately handle the truth. Because still in that day, you had Judaism. And still in that day, you had all these different sects that developed after the Babylon exile. They did not hold on to one faith and one group of believers, one congregation. Although the letter was not written to us personally, we're able to take quite a bit of that information to assist us on our journey. What are the scriptures that Paul is referring to? How do we get these scriptures? Has anyone asked those questions themselves? I know I start asking myself once I start walking this path, because I realized that I was under a religious sect, an organization that was struggling with that to be able to see the biblical truth. And that's many of us, especially in the United States. That's really, really many of us. But I start asking myself a question, then how did I become of these different sects of today? So let's take the journey to find out, where did the word of Jehovah come from? Reading the book of Genesis, we have many of the patriarchs that were sharing the word of Jehovah. So you have Adam, who taught Cain and Abel. Yes, he did teach Cain and Abel, so this is why Cain knew he was doing something wrong. And we have Enoch, who at that time men began to call the name of Jehovah again. We have Noah, who is the preacher of righteousness. And then we have Abraham, who taught his children, who taught his household how to keep the ways of Jehovah. And we can assume that most of this was probably word of mouth, and so they was teaching them personally on how to follow the ways of Jehovah for the instructions of that time. Now we go into the book of Exodus. Now the children of Israel, when you get into the book of Exodus, many people get stuck that it was actually 400 years of slavery, but it was 400 years that they was in a strange land. Because remember, when Exodus opens up, and you can go ahead and check that out, Joseph he didn't pass away till 110 years later. So there was some time that the people were still living, thriving, paying taxes and living their lives. still on the subject of Egypt, because they was living in Egypt. But it wasn't quite 400 years of slavery, but it was 400 years probably in the land of Egypt. But so we don't know how many years there was the silence from Jehovah. Kind of like what people say, Malachi to Matthew, there's silence. But I think we get confused that there's silence throughout in different areas of the word of Jehovah. So we have to continue to remember that the people was not enslaved for 400 years, but there was a length of time that they were in the land of Egypt. In Exodus, we have Jehovah giving Moses, Mose is his Hebrew name, he was giving the word to him to help the people to get prepared for the promised land. And in the promised land, following the word of Jehovah will lead them to peace and blessings once they get over there. The word of Jehovah was a blood covenant. Mose, gave a public address for Jehovah's instructions to the people, and in one voice they agreed, and Moses sprinkled blood on the people and the book and stated this: "Behold, the blood covenant which Jehovah has made with you in accordance with all these words." So that was a blood covenant. After he sprinkled the blood on the people, he also sprinkled blood on the book as the covenant. Since Moses was unable to cross over to the promised land, he actually gave instructions to Joshua. He gave him instructions to read the book of the covenant, which is the instructions, every Sabbath year at the Feast of Booths, the Feast of Tabernacle. The book was given to the priests to carry on and the Levites to carry over. And the priests, those are the ones who was the teachers of the word. They were to teach the people what is clean and unclean, what is holy and what's profane. Time had went on, and then there was kings that rose, and there were some good ones and there were some bad ones, just like good judges and bad judges. They also rose before the kings. And then there was those who repented and turned it back to the instructions for Jehovah, and along the way somehow the word of Jehovah was lost. One thing to remember, when you think about the commandments, there was commandments for the kings too. So the kings were required to write their own book of the law in the presence of the Levites, a priest. I think I got kind of confused that if the king that was over Jehovah people had to write the book of the law on in the presence of the priest, how did we constantly read about the challenges and the captivities and the battles and things like that? So just turn to Deuteronomy 17 verse 18 through 20. We're going to read the instruction that Jehovah commanded for the kings. Now it should come about when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, that he shall write for himself a copy of this law on a scroll in the presence of the Levitical priests. And it shall be with him, and he shall read all the days of his life, so that he will learn to fear the Lord his Jehovah, by carefully following all the words of this law and these statutes, so that his heart will not be haughty toward his countrymen, and that he will not turn away from the commandments to the right or to the left, so that he and his sons may live long in his kingdom in the midst of Israel. Well, something happened wrong. Some kings came and they went, and after the split of the kingdom, more kings came and went. Like we said before, there was good kings, there were bad kings, there was good judges, there was bad judges, but there were also kings who was not aware of the law, because their predecessor did not show them the righteous way. What about the priests? and the Levites. There were teachers. Why didn't they correct the kings? Why didn't they come and stand the ground on the word of Jehovah and say that this is a part of your duty as a leader of Jehovah's people? Let's look at an example of how the word was lost. Now, this was after the kingdoms were split, and King Josiah was the king of Judah. He became king at the age of 8, and around 18 years later, I think he was about 18, or around his 18th year, I should say, when there was some work that was going on in the temple, and the priests had found the book in the temple. When the king heard the words of the book, he tore his robes. Now, I love this statement that he made. It's in 2 Kings 22:13. Go and inquire of the Lord for me and for the people, for all of Judah, about what is written in this book, that it has been found. Great is the Lord's anger, Jehovah's anger, that burns against us, because those who have gone before us have not obeyed the words of this book. They have not acted in accordance with all that is written there concerning us. It makes you wonder what the kings before him, what were they was using to govern the people of Jehovah. What the most important thing is that the word was found, and he repented and he went back to the ways of Jehovah. This was not the only time the word of Jehovah gets lost and the people follow their own ways. We're learning from the scriptures how we're going to be fully capable and equipped for the very good work that he has called us to. Now, I have a few questions that you probably should start asking yourself. How do we rightly divide the word of truth? What is the word of truth? What are the scriptures? What teaches me into righteousness? These are some questions that you should be asking yourself each and every time that you even open the Bible. But these are some questions I want you to start thinking about over this month of July. Preparing for the good work requires us to be learning the word of Jehovah. Now, I know some of us are stuck at, I'm a New Testament person and I don't need the Old Testament. But I don't want you to be deceived. I don't want you to be fooled to believe that all you need is the New Testament. After all, the New Testament actually has a bulk of the Old Testament paraphrased, quoted inside the word in the New Testament. So don't be fooled to think that you just need the New Testament. You need to figure out what are these writers talking about. If you don't know, you have to go back and you have to read it. So don't be deceived. We have to get to know the scriptures. Thank you for joining me on today. And I'm hoping to see you on Tuesday at 7:00 p.m. for Torah Chat Points. And next Saturday at 10 a.m. as we continue to go forward with preparing for the good work. May Jehovah bless you and keep you. May Jehovah shine his face on you and give you his favor. May he shine his face towards you and give you his peace. In the name of Yeshua. Amen.